Welcome to Hardtalk on the BBC World Service with me, Stephen Sackur. Today I'm in Juba for an exclusive interview with the President of South Sudan, Salva Kirr. Just 3 years ago, he was receiving congratulations from leaders all over the world as South Sudan threw an independence party to mark its birth as Africa's newest nation. Now, President Kiir, leader of the Sudan People's Liberation Movement for some 9 years, is a focus of global concern as he struggles to contain a security and humanitarian crisis. The roots of the current trauma can be traced back to the summer of 2013. Salva Kirr sacked his entire cabinet, including his deputy, Riek Machar. 6 months later, violence erupted within the elite Presidential Guard force. Salva Kirr accused Machar of mounting a coup. Machar claimed the president was bent on dictatorship. The former vice president launched an armed rebellion against his former boss. The ensuing conflict has killed tens of thousands, displaced 1 million, and threatened to inflict a humanitarian catastrophe on the entire nation. It has also raised the spectre of poisonous ethnic violence. Machar, a Nuer, and the president, from the majority Dinka tribe, have traded accusations about massacres of civilians based on ethnic identity. Now, a fragile ceasefire is in place, but the enmity of South Sudan's two most powerful men remains. So, can the president lead his country back from the brink? Well, President Salva Kirr joins me now. Welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you very much.
Pretty much 3 years ago, you became the president of a new independent nation, South Sudan. And yet today, here we sit, and your nation seems to be tearing itself apart. Why?
After the independence, we thought that we have a task to deliver services to the people, which we promised them during the war. But some of my colleagues were impatient to wait according to what we have put down in the Constitution. And so they had wanted to get into power very quickly. And this is what is tearing our country into pieces now.
You blame the impatience of colleagues. Do you accept responsibility yourself for what is happening to South Sudan today?
Well, whatever blames that, I can accept, but I can't accept mistakes of others, especially after the 15th of December 2013, because that was uncalled for.
Explain to me what you mean by uncalled for.
There was no reason for leaving peaceful talks and go for arms
Now
to wage war against the nation.
This is the crux of what has become the conflict. Riek Machar, who was your vice president until you sacked him in the summer of 2013, claims that in December of 2013, your presidential guard moved against newer people inside that unit, and that was the beginning of what became a conflict, instigated, he says, by you.
He was lying. I don't think that I can do that. The Presidential Guard unit, even now, has no reason to move against any Nuer soldier in that unit. The second in command of that division is a Nuer, and he is still with us to date. So, if there was any intention of killing any Nuer, why was he left untouched?
I want to get into the tribal ethnic element of the conflict today in a second, but before we do, I must push you further on your relationship with Riek Machar. He, of course, now is leading an armed rebellion inside the country. The country is, in effect, in a state of civil war. You met him in Addis Ababa just a few days ago. You signed a cessation of hostilities agreement, and you laid out a process to work together on a new political roadmap. But it sounds to me like he does not trust you, and you do not trust him.
Well, as long as we are doing one thing, I can trust him. If he was sincere to his words, I can trust him. But if somebody is not sincere, it will be very difficult, even you yourself, to trust such a person. We signed a cessation of hostilities on the 9th of this month. And on the 11th, he violated it, attacking our forces.
You think he is actually instructing his forces to continue their offensive?
Definitely. Because he did not give them orders to stop fighting after signing.
Are you saying to me that the ceasefire is effectively finished?
No, it is not finished. On my side, my forces are reserving the ceasefire. They are observing it strictly according to the orders.
I asked Riek Machar just a few days ago whether he was truly in full control of all his forces. He insisted he was. I put the same question to you. Are you truly in control of all of the forces fighting in your name?
I'm in full control because these are regular forces under my command. I'm in full control of them.
What about the Ugandan battalions who are still in this country and involved in this conflict? What about the Justice and Equality Movement fighters from the south of Sudan who are in your country fighting in your name? They are not under your control.
No, they are not fighting in my name, and they were brought in by Riek Machar and his colleague Taban Dengai. These were the people who brought them in, not
Mr.
me.
President, I've spoken to independent security sources who say that fighters from the Justice and Equality Movement from Darfur are in Bentiu and are fighting in your name.
Well, I don't believe. The time they came in is over, and we already.
So they did come in.
They came in when Taban was the governor. That was the time they were in Bentiu.
And what about the Ugandans? We have other reports.
Okay, the Ugandans are in South Sudan. They came in after the incident in December. But there are Ugandan forces who have been here since 2006.
But in
and
this
they
conflict,
were brought in by Riek Machar.
If I may say so, Mr. President, there is irrefutable evidence that the Ugandans have been fighting on your side.
Yes, I don't deny that. I don't deny that.
They have dropped cluster bombs.
They fought in Bor, and they stopped there in Bor. They have not gone anywhere. They are here in Juba. They are in Bor.
And they have used cluster bombs?
No. I never heard that.
Well, why, when one of the international munitions clearance organizations asked for permission to go and clear cluster bombs from an area around Bor, and they were not given permission? Is that because you are embarrassed about what the Ugandans are doing?
Not at all, not at all. I never got that information even, that some agency wanted to go and clear any mines around Bor. I never got that report.
You characterize this as a conflict instigated by Riek Machar. But the truth is, right now, this looks like a conflict between tribes with deep ethnic hatred fueling the fighting.
Well, it is him who have actually incited the Nuer against Dinkas. But on our side, we have never done that. The hatred, yes, has been planted in them by Riek Machar. And we, on our side, always diffuse it. We tell people, no, there is no revenge.
The facts don't appear to bear that out. The first serious, outrageous acts of violence based on ethnicity appear to have taken place here in Juba, right after December 15th. We have reports backed by evidence from the United Nations and Amnesty International of your troops going into neighborhoods in this city, seeking out newer men, taking them to security facilities and murdering them.
When I got the information that there was killings going on in the estates around Juba, I set up a commission, and then I sent in troops to arrest whoever that has taken law into his own hand.
But with respect, it was the security forces who were doing the killing based on ethnicity. Your security forces.
I don't think, but I am not defending them. I say law does not know whom you are. If the security forces were involved in that, they must be punished for their actions.
Well, let's not say if. All of the evidence, including an extensive UN report, says your forces were responsible. Will you accept that?
I will not accept until they are investigated and then it is confirmed.
An investigation has taken place by the United Nations.
Yes, it is taking place. A commission to investigate is there.
And
the AU also has set up a commission to come and investigate.
Because of those incidents and the deaths of hundreds of Nuer people, and the fact that right across this city, Nuer people, thousands and thousands of them, fled for their lives to the safety of UN compounds, what we now have is a conflict which looks dangerously like a Rwanda-style ethnic conflict.
It will not. It will not go to that stage. These people who have ran to the UNMISS camp are now coming out on their own because they have seen there is nobody who is targeting them.
But I've been in the camps. There are people in those camps who are still frightened for their lives.
Those who are inside the camps are actually people who have been politicized because Riek Machar is sending messages that don't come out. We are coming to liberate you when we capture Juba.
Is that what you say to the woman who saw her husband shot in front of their children? You say that she has been politicized? That's not politicized. That's just a woman who believes in this country today it is dangerous to be a Nuer in a Dinka majority city.
Well, these people are even lucky. The Dinkas who were in the hands of Riek Machar, you cannot get a survivor who can tell you the story of what was happening. Did you ask him whether he was able to spare any Dinka? No. He's commander of the army forces, Peter Gadet, murdered his own deputy commander in the division.
You talk about Peter Gadet. It is interesting that he's been identified by the Americans as an individual responsible, allegedly, for serious atrocities who has now had sanctions imposed upon him. The chief of your presidential guard has also had US sanctions imposed upon him, and the UN Secretary General has said that those responsible for the atrocities and the systematic violation of humanitarian law should be held to account in a special tribunal.
I agree.
But that could be you.
It can be me. If it is me that has given orders, I don't mind facing the law.
Did you give orders?
I did not. I did not give orders for fighting. Riek Machar gave orders for fighting, and if you were to listen to the security people, you will get it that he was ordering his forces to open fire.
See, Riek Machar says to understand this conflict today, you have to go back. You have to go back to your governance of South Sudan over the last 2.5 years. He says that over that period, you behaved more and more like a dictator.
Well, he will have to prove. He will have to prove what have I done that shows I'm a dictator.
Well, it's an interesting point you say. Look at the evidence. Let us look at the evidence. Let us look at the letter, for example, written by a group of senior US State Department officials and South Sudan experts who wrote an open letter to you in July 2013 and said this: "We joined you in your fight against the abuses of the Khartoum regime for many years, but we cannot now turn a blind eye when yesterday's victims become today's perpetrators." That was a message to you.
To correct whatever that might have gone wrong.
In your administration.
Well, even now in Obama administration, there are mistakes. In Cameron administration, there are mistakes. You will not count them on Obama, nor will you count them on David Cameron.
But your mistakes appear to have fueled this crisis. You sacked your entire cabinet in the summer of 2013. You behaved in a way which led even the widow of the father of your nation, John Garang, to decide that you should no longer be the president of South Sudan. You oversaw an administration which repressed the media, which appeared to be limiting freedom for people in this country.
Not at all. We are a free country. The media is free. Have you seen all what they write against me when they insult me?
I'll tell you what I've done.
Have they been arrested?
I have spoken to one journalist who said to me that after he was critical of you on the radio, he was approached by state security. They said, "We know where you live." They also reminded him that one journalist who wrote a critical column in the Tribune newspaper ended up dead.
Well, people can take the law into their own hands. They go to you at night, they threaten you, and they go.
It seems was it just coincidence that after he'd written a column describing your regime as incompetent and useless, he was killed?
Whoever says that the regime is useless, that is their right to criticize the government. I believe there are people also who see a positive part of the government and can say positive things about the government.
But Mr. President, you know, through the course of this interview, you have directed your words and your criticisms at Riek Machar. You've called him a liar. You say he's systematically violating the ceasefire. You accuse him of disloyalty over many, many years. This is the man that you've said to your people you will now work with to get you out of this crisis. How can anybody take seriously your words that you will cooperate, you will work with him, if this is the way you feel about him?
When I talk against Riek Machar, it is for what he has done. But that does not really leave me to go my own way, and he goes his own way. We are citizens of one country. There is need that we come together. We embrace what we have agreed upon. We implement it so that our country remains stable.
To be clear then, in the short term, will you invite Riek Machar back into some senior government position, maybe to become vice president again?
Well, we will come together. It is now being discussed in Addis Ababa. And when people reach to the conclusion of that thing, we will come together again. And we hold a reconciliation conference. And after that, we will see what position has to be given to who.
He says
in an interim arrangements.
Yeah, you've talked about interim arrangements, which, as it happens, mean that you will not be facing election in 2015. It now seems you are intent on staying in power till 2017.
It is not me. It is not me.
Well, who is it then?
It is not me. It was pushed into my mouth.
Pushed into your mouth?
By the Americans. They said no for elections. I said, okay, when do you want the elections to be held? I was here with John Kerry.
John Kerry basically demanded that you postpone the elections.
Yes.
See, Riek Machar says the problems in this country can only really be addressed when you leave the presidency because you no longer have legitimacy.
No, it is not true. My presidency is still on up to next year, where we were supposed to go for elections. By July, a new government should be in office.
Might you stand down next year?
Well, we have not yet reached next year.
Is it a possibility that you will leave office voluntarily in 2015?
We cross our bridges when we reach them. We don't cross before we reach a bridge.
Before we finish, let's return to the situation on the ground in this country. Because we have the fighting, we also have a massive humanitarian crisis developing in South Sudan.
I agree with you.
I spoke to the director of the World Food Programme yesterday. He said it is no longer a question of whether people die of hunger in South Sudan. It is a question of how many. He is concerned that your government doesn't understand how serious the situation is.
No, we understand. We understand. It is not our making. It is a man-made disaster. And this is why we want the war to stop, so that we allow the humanitarian access to everybody in the country. If Riek Machar was to understand that the civil population is going to face one of the worst famines that has ever been witnessed in South Sudan, this is the time coming.
You are using the word famine, are you?
Yes. What will happen when people starve to death?
I mean, you sit here as the president of your nation and you tell me that you believe your people are facing famine. How do you feel about that? I mean, is that not something which suggests you have failed?
Do you want me to deny that, if this thing continues, there will be no famine? I cannot deny it. Facts are facts, then they must be said. We have to stop this fighting so that we save the people's life, the people to not to die of hunger.
As we finish, let's reflect on where your country is today. I started by talking about the hopes, the optimism of 3 years ago. Navi Pillay, the Chief of Humanitarian Affairs in the UN, says that you and Riek Machar must take an enormous amount of responsibility for what has happened in this country. Says you've been too busy fighting for power, for your personal interests, and you have jeopardized the interests of an entire nation.
I think leaders can be blamed for whatever mistakes they do. Like when we went to Addis Ababa, it was the leadership that we want to show, and this is why we accepted to sign the ceasefire. Although we have doubts that this thing will not be implemented. So, for us, with Riek Machar, if Riek was to be sincere and frank to himself, yes, he should stop his forces from fighting so that we address the humanitarian crisis that is unfolding in our country. As for hopes, I still hope that South Sudan, if there is no conflict today, we were progressing very, very smoothly and very rapidly. We could catch up again.
Well, with respect, Mr. President, you weren't. You yourself wrote a letter to all of your ministers decrying systematic corruption. You said $4 billion had gone missing. Your own office, the office of the President, was investigated. 2 of your most senior officials were accused of systematic corruption. With respect, I come back to the same point. Do you really believe you are the man to get South Sudan out of this crisis?
Not me to say that I am. It is not me. When I came to this office, they elected me. I did not come in through bullets. I came in by votes of the people of South Sudan.
And you still believe you can pull this country back from the brink?
I believe so. If these people do not stab me from the back, I can pull this country out of where it is now.
President Salva Kirr, we must end there, but thank you very much for being on Hard Talk.
You are most welcome.
That was an edition of Hard Talk presented by me, Stephen Sackur. For details of our complete range of podcasts and our terms of use, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.